morning. I'm Megan McCarthy, editor of Africa Print. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Pandemic or Not, Build a Happy and Healthy Workforce, brought to you by Health Squared and Agility in partnership with Printing SA. I'd like to welcome and introduce our panelists, Marcia Leroux, Sales Executive for Agility Channel, Hannah Steyn, founder and CEO behind the Passion for Wholeness range of healthy food, Jim Naika, Print SA KwaZulu-Natal Regional Chamber Manager, Dr. Jacques Snyman, Medical Director of Agility Health, Jean Moif, Traumatologist. So just some housekeeping rules. If you have a question for the panelists, please post these in the questions section. We will have a dedicated question and answer session after the panelists' discussions. The chat section is just for general banter. And please also take our polls in the polls section. So let's go into to you, Marcia, if you can unmute yourself so long. So Marcia, how do you build a culture of well-being and resilient employees who can deal with stress?
Thank you, Megan. I think a key aspect to this is creating an environment that promotes positive and a productive workplace. So this can include access to services and experts who can assist employees with real aspects that we are currently faced with in the situation that we are. And these can include aspects such as health, psychological, financial, and legal matters that all add to major stress. Also, as part of a duty of care perspective from an employer side, the employer can also assess the current healthcare cover that the employees have or may not have working for them, and then also find a partner like ourselves to assess and provide an integrated solution that will actually be financially viable to all of the LSM groups that you have, and also particularly then focus on that individual's healthcare needs.
Great, thank you so much. And how do you maintain a healthy and happy workforce to ensure optimal productivity?
Well, there are many tools that one can definitely access to make sure that you keep ensuring your optimal productivity. One can look at risk management tools, for instance, where continuous data development and trend analysis can be identified to show possible risks that can occur within the workplace based on claims histories and trends that we pick up from a healthcare perspective. Another way to optimize this productivity is not just providing access to these type of services that I mentioned before, but to make sure that staff are adequately reminded and educated in how to use these tools. I think that is sometimes something we get wrong. We tick the box to say we do have this available for our staff, but it's actually the after fact that counts more, making sure that they know how to assess this, how to fully utilize this, and what they can use this for. So that can definitely then also add to retaining valuable staff and becoming an employer of choice. I think in these times, we want to hold on to our staff, and especially the staff that adds quite a lot of value and return on investment for the employer. So these are definitely some tips that can help create that optimal productivity.
Great. And then what can responsible organizations put in place to facilitate holistic wellness and self-care?
Definitely aspects that we can look at is an employee wellness program, which I alluded to in your first question, where we can look at 24/7 access to professional healthcare professionals, but also legal and financial professionals to assist these individuals with any stress-related aspects that come up. We know that sometimes we have personal stresses. We don't always want to share it with our employer or even our HR manager because we are scared of the fact that we could lose our job. We seem unstable. We might be a risk to them. So having access to these type of services is confidential. They can share their concerns and they can get the right advice. And then also access also to other types of healthcare professionals in terms of the services that are out there in optimizing productivity again, and self-care, and making sure that you have access to that. And I mean, due to our current circumstances on a personal level, we know that these are absolute real problems we are faced with as employers. And then with that saying, as an employer with that duty of care, try and assess what one has available for these staff and how we can adequately assist them through all the services and integrated solutions that we now currently have available in the market.
Okay, great. And then in conclusion, what would your takeaway advice be to all employees and employers to ensure their own well-being?
So there's nothing more important than your own health and also your mental sanity. And I think these two things have been put to the test in the last year. And we sometimes forget how important it is to actually promote mental health very much. So really the takeaway is there are services available. And through Agility Channel, we do offer these to all the partners of Printing SA. And I would really encourage them to look into these things. And we will hear a lot now from our panel of experts that's going to talk more lengthily about this. But this is definitely where it ties up then, to know that what are my do's and don'ts with COVID? We're going to look at that now in terms of what is forced upon me or not, and who do I speak to when this happens. And I think the takeaway is to then make sure that you connect with the right a partner or organization like ourselves to assist you with that. In those terms, definitely employers as well as employees are going to be more comfortable. They will be able to have tools that can manage these stresses that we are faced with. And the best out of that thing, productivity will definitely raise because employees will have access to adequate services and providers, and the employers can retain those valuable staff and also focus on their return on investment that is so important at this time.
Great, thank you so much, Marcia.
Thank you.
I'll cross over to Jermaine now. Just a reminder to our audience to please, if you have any questions, please post these in the questions section. Please also answer our polls in the polls section. Okay, so Jermaine, if you can just unmute yourself. Jermaine, with many uncertainties around the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines, especially how this affects businesses, can South African employers, can South African employers require their employees to undergo mandatory vaccination for COVID-19 as a prerequisite to employment?
Thank you, Megan, and welcome to all of our guests today on the webinar. Perhaps I can give you a little bit of a background before I actually go into the response to that question. And I just need to state I'm not an epidemiologist by any means. But, on the 7th of January, if we look at it this year, the South African government publicized that its COVID-19 vaccine rollout plan. And the plan involved a number of stages. The priority being to ensure the vaccination of approximately 1.25 million healthcare workers, and those that are directly involved in the collection and processing of COVID-19 specimens. And thereafter, it planned to ensure that the rapid vaccination of more vulnerable segments of the population, and those people with underlying health conditions. We've just seen a day ago that the Johnson & Johnson vaccines have been received, and the president had already taken his inoculation. However, the government has made clear on numerous of occasions that whilst the uptake of vaccines was to be encouraged, and I emphasize this, it would not require or be obligatory on South African citizens to become vaccinated. It may accordingly be safely assumed that the government will not seek to legislate compulsory COVID-19 vaccinations, and this is consistent with, with reluctance by government to require vaccinations for other contagions. So the government aims to vaccinate about 70% of the country's citizens over the age of 16 years. And I'm sure Dr. Sneeman will cover that in future, so, or in the upcoming responses to his questions. And just my response to this question is that given the impact of COVID-19 on employees and employees in the private sector, the prospect of early vaccination is particularly attractive. So the subject of compulsory vaccinations has become an increasingly contentious issue, and there are significant legal and moral facets that must be considered. So, in the president's address to the nation towards the latter parts of January 2021, when he delivered the much anticipated news of the first batch of vaccines coming into the country, he mentioned that, and I emphasize, no person will be forced to take the vaccine. It would be based purely on a voluntary basis. Even with this, there's no specific legislation, that speaks to this, but there's rather reliance on existing legislation that addresses the aspect of vaccinations. Given the lack of legislation requiring vaccinations, employers will need to assess whether it would be permissible or desirable to require their employees to be vaccinated. In our view, there would be considerable legal risk attendant upon employers adopting workplace policies that require the employees to be vaccinated in order to prevent them from contracting or spreading the COVID-19 disease or virus. So any mandatory vaccination policy could, and that's depending on circumstances, violate Section 12 of South Africa's Constitution, which speaks to bodily integrity. And then, I'm going to look at three pieces of legislation. The first one is the Constitution. The second one is the Labor Relations Act, and specifically Section 1871F, which prohibits dismissals that discriminate against employees based on, amongst others, religion, conscience, belief, political opinion, or culture. And the last piece of legislation that I'll touch on before I end on this question is the Employment Equity Act, that offers similar protection against discriminatory conduct that falls short of dismissal. So the EE Act protects applicants for employment, and the LRA prohibits employers from prejudicing an employee or person seeking employment, rather, for refusing to do something that the employer is not lawfully entitled to require them to do. So basically what they're saying is that as a prerequisite to employment, vaccinations will not be one of those aspects that will fall in line with you deciding whether or not you can employ a person. And so the basis or the crux of this response will be that companies should be very careful with doing this. There's these three pieces of legislation, whilst in the absence of COVID-19 vaccination legislation, these three pieces of legislation will be a guiding tool to employers.
So what advice would you provide businesses within the printing and packaging specifically?
I think whilst this question is very specific, I do believe that the greater generic principles do apply. In our view, it is unlikely that a court will uphold a decision by an employer to subject an employee or an applicant for employment, for that matter, to occupational detriment, and that is dismissal as we know it, for failing to undergo a vaccination. But this is obviously subject to certain exceptions. Therefore, as a general principle, employees who refuse to undergo a vaccination may not, and I emphasize, may not be dismissed. And where such employees are unable to work remotely or to be allowed to work from the workplace, and this is subject to existing safe working practices and symptom monitoring. Employers would generally be limited to encouraging their employees to become vaccinated, provided that such encouragement does not go further than providing information and facilitating the logistics, and that is through the provision of special leave or the hiring of a nurse, perhaps, to address or do the vaccinations. Employees should be informed that vaccinations are not compulsory, and we must stress this. The final choice must be that of the employee, and employees should take care to ensure that there is clear consent on the employee's part. There may be some limited scope for employers to provide that only employees who've been vaccinated may work from the employer's premises. So in keeping with the employer's general obligation to accommodate objecting employees, a work from home option could be explored, provided that it's it's feasible given the nature of the employer's business. The employer would, however, would advise carefully assess whether differentiating between employees and differentiating between employees on the basis of itself would constitute a form of discrimination. Now, if we look at specific to the manufacturing sector, which we find ourselves in my opinion, it'll be merely impossible due to the nature and scope of work and specific to shop floors, so work done on shop floors, for employers to implement a work from home policy where it will work in the back office staff and your administrative duties. I believe that with shop floor staff, it needs to be dealt with differently. And I think in this view, businesses should continue to work with social distancing measures and the use of masks and sanitizers and preventative measures for the near future. In closing, employers may have certain there may be certain limited industries that could justify the dismissal of an objecting employee on the basis of an employee's incapacity to do the job. So this would likely be limited to employees working in industries where there is, and I'm going to place emphasis on these two words, where there is regular and obligatory interaction with members of the public. For example, if you look at the health industry, if you look at the airline industry, retail stores, public transport services, or those caring for the sick and elderly in care homes, those will fall in the category of employers or employees that are serving the public. And employers in that instances may have grounds, to have policies in place to ensure that their employees take the vaccines.
Thank you, Jermaine. Sorry, it seems like Megan is having some connection issues, so I'm just going to stand in for her. I'd like to move on to Dr. Stayman, because I've sat in one of your sessions and it was quite insightful from a medical point of view. And perhaps Dr. Stayman, if you can just give us an idea of how does the current COVID-19 variant differ from the first one?
Thank you for the question, and hello to all the listeners. So I do apologize for you being in one of my previous sessions, but let's move on. So how does the variant differ? You see, it's almost a question that you can answer every day. mRNA viruses, the type of the virus, replicates inside a cell using their own factory within the cell. But it's a very messy factory. So what it does, it makes this chain of amino acids, which is supposed to be DNA or RNA, in this case RNA acids in a row, and they're supposed to make up the virus. Now, as soon as something looks like a virus and it's viable, it becomes the virus and is excreted by the cell. Those that are not viable just die. So that means that it mutates, it changes frequently. So much so that those forms of the virus that are not viable die, and those that are viable actually survive. So you may have sort of what we call little misconnections within this mRNA chain, which then expresses different proteins on the outside of the virus. Now, if you look at your body's immune system, it recognizes those different elements of the virus to act against the virus. Now, our new virus, what it has done, it just had a sloppy factory, and it changed one of those sort of markers on the outside of the virus so that your body system now recognizes it differently. And it also may affect the receptor site where it binds onto. So it may be spread easier, infect easier, and even may become more virulent. So therefore, you've got a UK variant, you've got a Brazilian variant, and you have a South African variant. And it's not to say that the South African variant that they found somewhere in the US the other day was actually transported from South Africa there. It could be pure chance that it had the same sort of misprint, if you want to call it that, and therefore look as if it's the South African variant. So that's basically the problem with this mRNA viruses. Flu is an mRNA virus, cold's an RNA virus, HIV, So all of those sort of viruses, very difficult to find a vaccine because they're sloppy factories. They're manufactured in sloppy factories, yes.
Well, thank you for that. I think it sheds a lot of light in terms of our understanding. And obviously, South Africa not want to be left in the background. We had to come up with a more potent strain. So guys, we're still relevant. I want to move to Johan. And my question is sort of two-sided. The first part being, in your experience, what have been some of the most pressing mental health issues you've had to deal with during this past year? As well as what would you advise employers to do in order to support their employees during this time? You need to unmute yourself, Jan.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. One of the things we must understand, and this is just a little bit of a prelude to the first part of your question, is that essentially we're all dealing with a trauma. Now, and that's the reason for my answer, and also what is the prevailing problem at the moment, or the majority of people are concerned about. First of all, we're dealing with change all the time, every day, almost all day. Even with, don't want to beat a dead horse, but even with our rollout of the vaccine, there's been some changes, some upsets, if you want to call it that, and so on. So when we have all this change, it causes distress because we don't like knowing. We like when things are predictable and constant and so forth. Obviously leads to anxiety. Anxiety, one of the biggest parts of anxiety, one of the aspects of anxiety is, of course, fear. And when we're in a state of fear or in a state of high state of emotion, that causes a whole bunch of issues during our daily life. Something simple as concentration takes quite a big knock. And that's been the main issue or main component that I've experienced from a lot of people during this period, is that they are worried, they have to deal with change all the time. That causes anxiety, and that causes almost a cyclical problem of causing other issues like, as I say, concentration, which causes more concern or anxiety because now I'm not functioning properly, which kind of brings or leads us to the next question, which was originally, what can be done to support employees during this time? And it ties in nicely with the first question.
Sorry, here we go. Hi, Annelie. Sorry, you need to unmute yourself. And they said technology would make life a lot easier.
Exactly. Sorry, I was just worried because I couldn't hear you, and then you couldn't hear me. So hi everyone, and thanks for the opportunity, Abisha.
No worries. Annelie, I know you're a great ambassador of Health Squared and Agility. And as an athlete, coming from your experience, can you just please give us an explanation of the importance of nutrition and a healthy diet in order to maintain, your mental health and physical well-being?
Yes, for me, that's all my life been very important because I'm not anymore, but I used to be a professional sports person, and then your health and your body is actually your business. So it becomes a very important thing is to keep your body healthy. And I always say science as your base and logic as your lead. So if we look at science, all the research will show how important it is to have a healthy body to be able to operate better. And the healthier the body, the healthier the mind. So all the research done on the mind again, that says you've got to, the power of the mind and how much more you can do with a healthy, powerful mind. But at the end of the day, if your physical well-being is not good, then, I think it affects in a big way your mental health. And in the workforce, if the healthier the body is, the healthier the mind is, and it plays a big role then with nutrition, because lack of concentration, fatigue, especially now where people sit at their homes. It's a different type of work ethic. It's almost like that we almost work harder or more or different times or less. And it plays, like Joan said, a lot on the mental side. But if you can keep your immune healthy, if you can keep your body healthy, I mean, we can all just, like I said, science is your base, logic is your lead. Logically, it just makes sense that if you keep your body strong and healthy, you will have a better mental health. And I think this pandemic, as in many ways, has created this opportunity to actually have a healthier lifestyle, because now, instead of having to choose maybe foods at cafeterias, at kiosks, or taking something to work that you get that is okay to eat or fits into the work circumstances, you can actually now at home make healthier foods. And I mean, really what you prefer, what you can read up on. So maybe the companies can even tell the employees about that. And then with something like agility, for me, the rewards of just living a healthy life. I mean, I can now, and as you know, the pharmacies aren't just pharmacies anymore. There's food products there. So for me, the luxury of my awards to help keep my mental and physical health better is to be able to spend those rewards on my supplements, my vitamins, minerals, and healthy foods, because good nutrition means, a balance between the three major food groups, and then your supplements if you need that. And for me, that's always been to keep my immune stronger. And if your immune is strong, you can also maybe fight these viruses a little bit better, or that's how I believe. So yes, for me, as not only a sports person and now as an older individual, for me that, no one can argue the fact that health is most probably one of your biggest blessings in life, if I can say so. So if you have the opportunity to contribute looking after your health and investing in your health. And that's why for me, when I was young, I used to just have a hospital plan, and I got the advice from actually Agility to, no, it's not going to serve you that well anymore now that you're getting older. And it was the best investment in my health. So yes, that's about mental and physical health, the importance of what nutrition plays in that. Yeah.
No, fantastic. That's, like we take that so much for granted, and hopefully, what I got from that as well is, my boss needs to give me more time off so that I can get some of your recipes and make some of these healthy, health options.
That would be a very, very nice thing. But yeah, like I said, the awards are out there. And if you look at what you're awarded for is to exercise and to live healthily. And then, that means cashing your agility card, as I call it. And for me, health is not expensive. Sick is. So if you invest in a retirement annuity, why not invest in a medical aid that can also take care of you? It's almost like a retirement annuity paying out when you need it. So yeah, for me, I would love the employers to tell the employees to maybe look at healthier options. And that's my passion, is to create or to develop foods that's in every meal, it's balance. And the people are welcome to go look at my website to see. But I mean, there's plenty. I mean, the whole market is saturated with information on healthier choices, healthier foods. But I think the employers can really sort of, and the incentive of the awards push people towards that. And then it becomes a lifestyle, something you keep on doing. Consistency is the mother of all success. If you keep on doing something, it becomes a lifestyle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Hanneli. We will chat to you some more, but I'd like to go back to Joan because I think this almost filters into what you were telling us before in terms of how the employers can support their employees.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just make sure you can hear me. Everything's good.
Yes.
All right, awesome, great, thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, we experience a lot of anxiety, and one of those anxieties among a lot of staff members are job security. So what a lot of companies can do, and hopefully most companies, is to be quite transparent about this. You know, we always think we're trying to protect people when it's bad news, but even bad news is better than not knowing. Not knowing creates more anxiety. So it's really important for companies to be transparent with regards to your sick leave, what's going to happen if you do have COVID, are you going to have a job when you come back, are you going to be able to extend your sick leave, are we going to be able to accommodate you, all this kind of stuff, to be able to answer those questions and obviously educate staff about this, and that will reduce so much stress, which of course then will allow staff members to be able to function a lot better.
Thank you for those insights. I think you know we had a chat with you towards the end of last year, and you know some of your insights were incredible. But you know we will definitely chat with you a little bit more. I'd like to go back to Dr. Snyman because I think it's so valuable to have your time from a medical background. My question to you is, could you possibly expand on Agility Health's offerings that promote health and wellness in the workplace? What sort of service offerings or packages do you guys have?
I think Marcia already touched on those, but I think it's the integration of all of those. So although you start with an employer wellness program, you need to link that into your medical scheme, and I think Hanley has already said that. But you also look at those staff members that cannot afford medical schemes, so that you need to look at your primary health care for those as well as staff care products. So the whole stack or suite of products are well integrated to support all the members or all the beneficiaries within a workplace environment. Not everybody earns the same, and therefore you need to cater for all those earners, all the different levels of earning within that environment. Because if you allow only a certain group of employees to be, how would I put it, insured for health, it means that you leave a portion out. Now, leaving a portion out is often the burden that you bring back into your company, because that is also the burden that has no access, brings in the psychosocial trauma, but also bringing in the physical diseases, and which could be contagious. So it's important that you make sure that you start from the very lowest level, make sure that your wellness programs integrate well with your staff care, integrate well with your medical scheme in order to have a proper wide catch net for all your employees in any organization. And then, of course, having the ability to adapt and making sure that when there's pressure, you can change timely and make sure that that is taken care of appropriately for those particular individuals.
No, fantastic. And I think hot topic at the moment is, I think we saw the first rollout yesterday. I was actually saying to my colleague that, look, we're now all fine, because I heard that there's now herd immunity, because I heard it on the radio. What can you tell us about the vaccinations? Would you recommend it, or how would you advise an employer to possibly advise their staff about going about it?
You see, you're almost asking me the question that we need to ask the government, and the government's not even getting this right. So it's not an easy answer. So you need to make sure that the vaccine that you want to use actually covers the organism. With other words, in the sense that when I vaccinate you, you make antibodies that can neutralize the affecting virus. so if that infecting virus slips past your immune system because you've created antibodies that doesn't recognize this virus, you can still become sick. So I don't want to, let me give you an analogy. I don't want to inject or vaccinate you with last year's flu vaccine and you get this year's flu. It's not going, it's pretty much the same. Now, the problem with this is it's not seasonal like flu. It mutates more constantly. So the vaccine developers made sure that they actually almost mimic or predict the virus's antigenic changes over time, so that some of those manufacturers have a bit of a wider or a different target of the virus that they expose to the body's immune system, so that the antibodies that you form has a wider choice of viruses to neutralize. Now, if you look at the vaccines currently on the market, we all know about the AstraZeneca one. The AstraZeneca one was very quickly and rapidly developed and had a very narrow target on the virus spike protein for their antigenicity. And very early on, they also demonstrated that it was less effective than, for instance, the Pfizer one that's at a wider range, and also the Johnson & Johnson or the Janssen one, and so forth. So when you select the vaccine, you should select the vaccine where there's a little bit of room to play. And therefore, I think those vaccines that are coming in now has got a bit of a wider target of the virus and may give us a little bit better protection going forward. I'm not saying they're going to be 100% there, but we've got a much better chance of getting proper immunity with the newer vaccines coming in. Having said that, if you look at that, although the AstraZeneca one was approved by the Medicines Regulatory Authority, SAPRA, the other two has already been submitted and can be used within certain sections according to the Act for vaccination of people. Both of those companies already have approval in the European Union and the FDA in the United States. So it's not that we're looking at experimental vaccines. They're tested vaccines, and we know the efficacy of those particular vaccines. So why the Johnson & Johnson one is at the moment a little bit more attractive is I don't need a -80 fridge two doors away in order to keep the vaccine viable, to say. So that is you also have those sort of logistic challenges that you need to look at when disseminating or dishing out or distributing a vaccine into a country such as South Africa, especially if you're looking at the wider rural areas. Now, having said that, you mentioned early on that we may have herd immunity. Yes, you may have herd immunity against this variant. It doesn't mean that you've got herd immunity against the next variant. Again, you had last year's flu. It doesn't mean that you're now free from getting this year's flu. So it's not easy and it's a difficult concept, and you can't bank on saying I've had it, I can't get it. It's because it varies so often. So vaccination should be considered, especially if it's a broader type of vaccine with a better immune response.
And I think I'm looking at the questions now, and you seem to be quite popular, I think, because everybody's on the edge of their seats at the moment about this vaccination. But one of our guests is asking that, obviously, with the viruses mutating at this rapid rate, should you take the vaccination now and a new variant emerges, would you have to then take another vaccination, to counter the new variant, or would you just have to naturally develop antibodies, as you mentioned before?
It's one of those questions I can say yes to both of those. So yes, it's your vaccine development companies usually try and also predict those sort of variabilities. So when you go for a vaccination, make sure that you, as I said, go for one with a little bit more wider cover. And it's often that when you develop your own antibodies that you don't have wider cover than the strain that infected you. So it's always good to consider a vaccine program going forward. as I've said before.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I'd like to move back to Jermaine. Looking at it from a business point of view, I know you're one of my colleagues, so we've had these discussions many a time. But perhaps for the greater audience, if you could maybe advise, if an employer is entitled to discipline, is an employer entitled to discipline an employee for failure to adhere to health and safety protocols, where the conduct of that employee is not related to the course and scope of their employment? And perhaps if you can give us an example of such a instance.
Yeah, which is a good question. And specifically to this, the employer, on the basis of an employee's personal life and how it affects the workplace, they need to draw those lines first. And unless an employer can show that the conduct of an employee outside of the workplace has damaged the employment relationship in some way, the employer doesn't have much grounds to actually discipline the employee for their conduct outside. Now, there's two parts to it. So when we talk about conduct, we can talk about misconduct in the face of things that the employer or employee was wearing an employer's T-shirt or a T-shirt or work apparel with company logos and stuff on it, and they were engaged in misconduct in perhaps a brawl or a fight or whatever. Then the employer has recourse to discipline them because they brought the company's name into disrepute. But if we speak about health and safety protocols in specific, so if we say that an employee was outside of the workplace, was not wearing a mask, and was fined for not wearing a mask, look, as far as that is concerned, I don't think the employer has much recourse there. But only, like I mentioned in my response to the question that was asked on the chat, is that the employer's duty is to advise. It doesn't portray the image of damaging the employee-employer relationship if the employee doesn't wear a mask outside of the workplace. So that's how I would deal with it, in that I would draw the line as to what infringes on the employee's personal life and what infringes on the employer's image. And if those lines are not crossed, then I wouldn't take any recourse.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Jermaine. John, back to you. I think at the moment, a lot of people, we've spoken about the fact that the employment conditions have changed. Some people on short time, some people on, reduced salaries. What can people do to alleviate the stresses and anxiety brought about by these types of significant changes?
Well, one of the things, and this is true for the whole pandemic in total, is to try and deal with the situation as we find it. To go back to what I mentioned earlier about all the anxiety that's happening, one of the things we need to do is to reduce the things that cause more anxiety. Now, social media, unfortunately, is one of the major contributors to anxiety at this point. As we got news about the rollout, as we get news about another strain and so on and so forth, one of the big problems is we have false news and we have what I call half news, in that we only read a headline. The headline says, new strain found, with a asterisk saying, is deadly. People panic, people are very worried. So one of the big things that I recommend to people is really seriously reduce social media and replace social media time, and replace that with personal time, meaning that it doesn't matter where the anxiety comes from, doesn't matter where the stressors are coming from, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's workplace, whether it's financial, we need to do things to balance it out. And that goes back to what some of the previous speakers have spoken about as well. Diet plays a massive role, but me time that I use to take my mind off all the problems, all the issues, that's the time that's needed to balance these things out. The first thing that pops into my head always is a little bit of exercise, or at least getting busy. But things like journaling, things like spending time with the family, not on the computer, not in front of the laptop, not in front of the cell phone, especially, as I've mentioned already, not on social media, causes or helps us to reduce the anxiety and balance out all the external pressures that we have. So those are the main things. I can keep you busy with this all day, but those are the main things that I would recommend people take a look at to alleviate all of this.
Awesome. And I think, Haneli, you could possibly speak to this because, you know, as athletes, you guys often go through mental exercises or processes, you know, to prepare you for the big occasion. Would you like to share what sort of processes you go through or used to go through in order to prepare yourself from a mental well-being point of view?
Yes, and I think as Jean and Dr. Dr. Snyman, it all link, you know, and the fact that, and I think this whole webinar is in a way about your health, and because that is the main topic with the virus at the moment and everything. And like John said, you know, that your mind, there's some exercises, there's nutrition for your mind too, and that is that me time. That's nutrition for your mind. For the body, there's the real food nutrition. And like you said, with social media, there's so much information out there about diets and this and that. I mean, I come face to face with people, or not face to face with people, not in this day and time, but I hear from a lot of people, the huisgenoot said that, or this magazine said that, or social media said this. And to really, as Agility is doing, is rewarding you for exercise, for me time, but to also give people real information about what is good food, what is good nutrition, what is the what takes away the mental stress. We don't always think about the me time. We don't always think exercise can help that. And as a ex-professional athlete, you know, the mind played such a role. You know, your body is your business. You keep that healthy with nutrition. But the mind then, I mean, obviously the mind is strong. It's sort of a figure eight, I almost want to say. The one links into the other. So if the mind is strong, then you're able to visualize and to prepare for a race and to have positive thoughts and positive energy. And like John said, is to spend that. It's almost like a meditation. That's basically visualization by sports people. But you need that, because when the gun goes, the auto system, what you've put into the mind and what you've put into the muscles takes over. So if you can take, you know, that gives you the edge. So there's a lot of champions in this world. There's there's a lot of people that exercise. There's fewer champions, and then there's even fewer legends. Legends are the people that gets the edge on their opponent and that wins over and over and over. Now, if your edge can be your, if your mental strength can give you that edge, it can push the body far beyond that limit of pain. When the body is completely depleted, then that's the mind to carry you through. So for me, I always say, if you can take 10 athletes and if you can theoretically say they've got the exact DNA, the exact nutrition, the exact training, what's going to make one of them, who's going to win? It's the one that can take the pain the longest. And the one that can take the pain the longest is the one with a mental strength that can push them that little bit further. And I've got this, well, it's not my answer anymore, but when I was young and very competitive, people used to ask me, so why am I so obsessed with winning? And I would say, because I just cannot get obsessed by coming second. Yeah. And that's a little bit of, you know, if you have a strong mind that keeps on changing things into positive things, and it's not very easy, but if you're, like I said, it's a figure eight, it's a snowball effect. The stronger, the better the body, the better the mind. The better the mind, the more inquisitive it will be about what can I do for my health? What things can I do? What to improve it. And that's why for me, and I'm as an ambassador of agility, it's really part of my motivation. I will always want to exercise, but
Yes.
I mean, what's better to get awards for exercise and have what I call my luxury health treatments is to go to, as an older woman, to go for nice skin treatments, to afford my vitamins and minerals where I used to be sponsored with it. Now my awards for living healthily. So yes, mental strength for me is crucial, very essential.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Hanley. Like I said, it's awesome having you with us today. You've shared some amazing insights outside of the business space that we generally have these platforms for. Marcia, I'm going to come back to you because I think you would be the best person to articulate some of these questions that have come from our guests. One of the questions has been asked, which is, will Agility consider offering employee wellness programs with printing SA members or employee wellness support desks that includes non-Agility members?
Thank you for that, Abisha. And I'm typing away, so you're saving me some typing time, but I will still answer online as well. So absolutely, I really think the opportunity is there, and hence the fact that we are here today to really assess these associations that are in need of a form of an employee wellbeing program, which we do offer, and we can definitely assist there in building the right program that these associations want, despite the fact that they're not associated with Agility. There was a question actually that I just want to add to this in terms of our employee wellbeing programs. So we do have 2 programs available, and I mentioned right in the beginning some of the benefits that one can get and the advice that we so currently need from our health, mental, our physical well-being. And this automatically forms part of the benefits that we provide to groups. So a group, the question was, how big should a group be? We're working from 5 members. We know times are difficult. So for the smaller groups that only have a consistency of 5 employees, we will consider you as a group, and you will then also have access to this employee wellbeing program that basically gives you 24/7 access to nurses for health questions, psychologists for mental well-being, legal advisors, and financial advisors. And then building onto that, this will give us a very good idea in terms of what the trend analysis is in the organization, what possible risk factors there could be from a mental or physical health perspective. And we can then build onto that educational days. We can do absenteeism management. So it really depends on what the employer is seeking in this instance, and having us sit around the table and work out the best integrated solution that's really going to pin down and manage and focus on those aspects that the employer is concerned about.
Sure. So Marcia, would you guys be willing to pay a visit to some of the companies, particularly within our stable, and perhaps have a consultation to see if you could build some type of a wellness program for the organization? Because from what I'm seeing in terms of some of the questions, people are saying, what are the practical things that an organization can implement at work in order to build a healthy, happy workforce?
Fantastic. And I think it is there's a lot of practical things, and just from my own experience, like Jean also said, get up, walk around a bit. Hanal spoke about the food. These are easy things that one can already adapt into your environment at work from an HR perspective, in doing that education, how one can stay healthy as a quick fix. But I would definitely suggest that I would happy to stand the time off, my consultants and myself, to meet with these organizations and these individuals that would like to have more practical examples, our advice, our assistance in this. I would be more than happy to set that up and have these discussions in more detail.
Great, thank you so much for that. I'd just
You're
like to
welcome.
remind our guests that we are running a poll, so please, before we end the session, kindly complete the poll so that we can get some insights into how you've experienced today's session. I've got another question here from Anwar Balim, and he says, it seems that agility does not cater for the more expensive hospital care, such as heart bypass, which could easily cost 500,000 or more. Perhaps I can put this through to Marcia or Dr. Snyman.
Yeah, perhaps I should take that one. I mean, that's definitely not true. And let me just let be frank on this. Now, Agility is an administrator managed care organization. So we administer the benefits of a medical scheme, make sure that there's equitable access across the board. So a medical scheme is a mutuality. So every person that belongs to a medical scheme must have equal access based on the need and the necessity of that particular individual. So a cardiac bypass or a heart bypass, that is a PM prescribed minimum benefit. I mean, that has to be catered for on your lowest option. So whether you've got a hospital option only or whatever, I have to reimburse that particular in full. If you choose, so if it's an emergency procedure and you end up at a non-designated service provider hospital, then a scheme, and I'm just saying these are general. A scheme cannot add a co-payment or or something like that, and needs to pay that particular claim in full. If it's an elective procedure and you'd rather want to go to a non-designated service provider hospital and doctor, and there's a shortfall of a few thousand rand, then unfortunately I cannot keep the rest of the mutuality, the rest of the group responsible for your choices. It was your choice to go there, and the fact that you then choose a more expensive provider, it's unfortunately your choice. Having said that, a managed care organization and or administrator or scheme must make sure by law that there's sufficient cover in every area for his or her member, so that if there's no designated service provider in your area, you can then access the one that's in your area, and again the same emergency or what we call involuntary admission rule applies. So I'll give you another example. If you look at some of your bigger medical schemes and you look at oncology cover and so forth, that's usually a very, very hot topic. Often you get cover for a year, and people say, I have 100,000 rand for a year for whatever cover on oncology. But what you don't realize is if you read the fine print, it says from date of diagnosis, a calendar year, not a calendar year, with a 12 months forward. So that means you actually, if you get diagnosed in June, you've got 50,000 rand for this year, and you've got 50,000 rand for next year. Whereas in the schemes that we administer, such as Health Squared, you have the total amount available, even if you're diagnosed on the 29th of December. And then your next 100,000 rand starts again on the 1st of January. So people often do not read the fine print and do not understand medical scheme cover properly. So how certain things are applied often makes a big difference into how your members cared for. And just lastly, to state off, so what we are a big proponent of is outpatient care, and that is making sure that we can keep a patient healthy as long as possible and avoid unnecessary hospitalization. And within a couple of domains, for instance, in psychiatry, we've been able to pay for the so-called non-PMB medicine from risk, just to avoid hospitalization of our patients, to make sure that they can stay healthy outside of a hospital, treating or coping with trauma a lot better.
Thank you very much for clarifying that up, Dr. Snyman. That actually does bring us to the end of our session for today. I would like to extend our sincerest thanks to Agility and Health Squared, who are Printing SA's flagship sponsor, for putting on this occasion. I think it's definitely been insightful. I see we've hardly had anybody drop off this session because everybody's insights have really resonated with everybody. So my thanks to my colleague Jermaine, Dr. Snyman, Annelie, Marcia, as always, great working with you and seeing you again. And Joan, the first traumatologist I've ever met in my life. Hopefully we'll meet again. To our guests, please complete the poll before you sign out. And once again, thank you for attending. And please look out for more sessions from Printing SA in partnership with House Square